I mean, we've been talking for long enough already, John. So,
Good half an hour of
all
talking about
right.
things in South America.
Yeah, fixed on South America. Today, though, we're gonna talk about some giants,
Giants, okay, and things and dragons and
all that fun stuff.
monsters and
Dragons, giants, and John. Oh my.
yes, that was the title of the email, I think. Yes.
Yes,
So
this is the title.
where shall we start? In fact, there's actually a very relevant place to start today because quite recently a new paper came out about megaliths.
Okay.
And you might say, well, what have megaliths got to do with giants? And it was because most, or I'd say many, when the Indo-European peoples, so the pastoral farmers came into Europe and certainly Northwest Europe, they saw these megalithic structures and they couldn't understand where they came from. Big stones everywhere. And so stories of giants started to become a thing. And this is stories of big giants because not all giants are big. You can get small giants too. Um, so but that's where they came into being, and that's the general perception is that the pastoral farmers came to Europe and thought giants must have made these megaliths, and we think that the agricultural farmers, so the Neolithic farmers from the Near East, made the megaliths. But a paper came out, say, just a little while ago, which dated some of the megaliths in France and found that they actually were built before the Neolithic farmers came to Europe. So
Okay.
they were built by hunter gatherers,
Okay.
Mesolithic hunter gatherers. So it may be that the agricultural farmers thought, whoa, did giants build these? Which turns much of our thinking on its head. Well, not, yeah, I mean, well, there's certainly the idea of where this all came from. So, yeah, that's an interesting thing to look at. But yeah, in short, well, giants aren't necessarily big people. Excuse me. They're just very powerful people. And so the smallest giant I know is Ptah, who is uh, a primordial god of Egypt. So he created the world and the cosmos, but there are sort of images and examples of him saying he's only a few inches tall in some instances, but he's also considered a giant. So yeah,
Yeah.
so that's a sort of a good start. The giants can build Stonehenge, the cosmos, and yet can be from a few inches high to well as tall as you want. Um,
Okay. So yeah,
but
because didn't all of those gods have the ability to just shapeshift as well?
all those gods, where from where?
Like when we're looking at ancient Egypt, they were shapeshifters.
Um, I don't know if there were shape shifters. They were represented with different heads at times. I'm not entirely sure the whole mythos around that, but there must be some primitive thinking of having animal attributes to them.
Yeah. For some reason, I'm thinking
Um,
about the part of the Book of the Dead where it shows, I can't remember what goddess typically is involved. I think it's one of the goddesses normally involved with cats. But when Ani makes it to the land of peace at the very end, shows this god irregularly kind of out of character as a hippopotamus.
hmm. Well, maybe then, maybe they could change into different animal beings. That would, I can't see an issue with that. Um, yeah, a bit in a god-like terms, mythological terms.
in
Yeah,
in godlike terms. I'm a
yeah,
god.
to,
I
to
can do
change it to a
whatever.
hippopotamus. If God wants to do that, then yeah, I can't see a reason why. But that doesn't make them giants. I mean, that's just suggesting that gods can make themselves any size they want. But we rarely see that at all. I don't, certainly in European myth, we don't see gods as being necessarily giants per se. Um,
Yeah. They
we
talk
do,
about giants.
they talk about giants, but giants tend to be folklore rather than myth. So they use, they are used to explain a local landscape rather than were necessary to create the universe. That makes sense. So yeah, although we do see, well, we don't see giants in the Old Norse creation myth. We see the Jotun, the Jotnar, and they're often called giants, but they're not giants. They're more monstrous beings, which may just be a way of insulting them rather than actually they were monstrous beings who, who are just saying they're a different society who we just don't like. An early form of racism, I guess, in
Yeah, that
some
doesn't surprise me
potentially.
too much. Bunch of Christians writing about those heathens hundreds of years later.
Very similar thing. So yeah, it's interesting that we don't get gods that are necessarily giants. But saying that, you get the nearest creation myth has the monster that comes along at the end that has to be defeated by the god who will become the supreme god. So Zeus has to fight um, Kronos, who's considered, I guess, a giant. But you also see it in other myths, in Phoenician myths and Hittite myths. There's a very similar creature that walks across the landscape, in terms of and across mountains, suggesting he is giant given his size in the descriptions. So actually, whilst those creatures aren't deities, they are, or divine because no one worships them. They are a necessary part of the religious writings, say the mythology, to allow the world to be as it is. Because obviously, if a god defeats something much bigger than themselves, that makes them more powerful in the eyes of those that will end up worshipping them. And that is really what it is. It adds those sort of stories add credibility to the pantheon and hierarchy that they worship. It's
I remember specifically there were titans and other
yes,
horrifying beings in Greek myths that were specifically described as giant, or they would have
yes,
used words like
it could
that.
be yes interpreted as giants, but the Titans weren't, as I say, divine per se. So no one worshipped Kronos, as far as I'm aware, for example. But is a necessary supernatural type creature that you need in your plot to be defeated to make the other gods look good.
Yeah.
You can't just say, oh, yeah, a god needs a reason to be the god. There has something magical has to happen.
Yeah.
So in the old days, the gods defeated giants. The newer gods could just be born of a virgin, and that makes them wonderful. Um,
Shows their heroic purity.
yeah, exactly. So there's different, or a god sacrifices his son. That's his, a real reflex of a hero god being becoming a sort of a sacrificial god to show how great they are. I'll give up everything to be God.
Yeah.
By giving up, he means he isn't actually giving up anything because he knows it's all going to come back to him. And his son will come back to life. So he isn't really giving up anything. He's just putting his son through, a bit of torture, which is weird. Um,
Hey
in
man,
terms,
torture is good for the whole family, back in the
well,
Roman days.
good for his. So yeah, I mean, it resonated, but much of it, much of that story was written by the Greeks and leveraged Greek motifs. But yeah, so certainly defeating big gods. Not only in the Near East, we see it in the creation myth of the Indo-Europeans. The primordial beings, one kills the other one, and you have to assume they're large because the Earth is made from them. So that would suggest that they're as big as the Earth, really. A bit of
Or big
math,
enough for the Earth.
big enough for the Earth.
Yeah,
So
'cause,
so
you
yeah,
know,
so that giant, the giant, we have also have the giant that is the primordial sacrifice, and that's a really common story. When we see that, so all over, not just Indo-Europeans, but Eurasia and to some degree into the Americas. So it's a story that's been going for some time. That so there's actually probably two types of giants. There's the giant that is necessary to give reason for material in the universe, and there's the giant that is a powerful being that either is defeated to show your own strength, or that does something to explain why someone's built something that humans couldn't have built, or was perceived as couldn't be not being built. Which
yeah,
I haven't really thought about it in that way before, but that yeah,
yeah. Well, I mean, back in the day too, I mean, you could really look at these pre even into early Christian practices. Everybody was always trying to plea with nature or make an appeal to nature because it was this
Mhm.
very non-understood, scary,
Sacred. Nature was sacred. The cycles of nature. The fact that you had these yearly cycles, where everything grew, then died, and doesn't
or
come back.
yeah, or terrifyingly, you get this earthquake and you don't know why
It,
it would happen.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. You have to blame something or someone. Why did
Um,
the volcano go off? Well, yeah. Why
or
did
you
this
have to
flood
wonder,
happen?
yeah. Anyway, keeping it
Keeping
Christian,
back to giants,
giant, giant
giants. We
realistic.
missed the giants, and what
Mhm.
else was it? Giants and dragons.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
So, well, to keep it giant related, something that kind of I didn't really think about until later on, when you asked last time about if the Valkyries were inspired by angels
yes. Syncretism. Whether
or,
there's any of that going on.
or there's some type of influence that shaped it.
Hmm.
I just thought not too long ago after um, starting to peer back into Norse mythology. When I was prepping for an interview I had a couple of days ago, the myth of the creation myth, or the sort of the beginning myths in Norse myths, is that the gods went to war with the giants, and
War with the was it the Aesir? So the Aesir and Vanir war, and the Jotnar, who aren't giants, they're monstrous beings, were on one side of that.
um, and so that kind of so it wasn't just okay. They had this fight with a group of giants. It was afterwards when they were talking about the children of the giants, the elves, who go around and cause problems in the world.
Oh, when the elves were the children of the giants that cause issues in the world. Okay, I don't remember that
That's when
back.
the lack of sleep starting to kick in.
No, don't partying too much, are you?
I wish this time of year is like insanity in terms of the things I have to do on a daily basis. Um, but anyway, the reason why I got the idea of this was it sounded very much like Enoch. Um, so the Watchers came down. They had sons that were half-breeds called the Nephilim, and then they had giants. They had children that were giants,
Yes, the Nephilim were meant to be giants. Yeah.
and then their children became beings that exist nowadays as spirits that cause problems in the world. And I had thought, okay, if this is 200, if this is about starts being written about 200 years after these people are turned Christian, wouldn't would there be the possibility that Christian mythology shaped some of these myths when they're being written?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's syncretism there. There's certainly influence there, and the myths are written by supposedly Christians. So Snorri Sturluson definitely was Christian, but I don't know if the authors of the sagas were. I certainly, um, on a quick search through my own research, cannot see anything saying elves are children of Jotnar. Um, but yeah, there certainly is. There's got to be something there. You know, as I say the wearing of a Thor's hammer seems so out of place when looking at the rest of Europe. Yeah, it sort of coincides with Christians wearing crosses on their necks. Yeah, and so yeah, and other stories are similar. Yeah, so but are they from an older time? Are the this Nephilim? Is that an older story? But I don't see many stories. I'm just trying to think. You get the Titans, I guess, but it's a different. I don't know. That's an interesting. That requires some deep pondering, Garrett, on on influences. So then, because the Nephilim are mentioned in Genesis, aren't they?
Hmm.
It's one of the oldest books as well. So yeah, the chances of a direct influence is unlikely. The chance of an early influence are not impossible, but less likely. Um, so it's more likely that such stories are brought by people coming in from other cultures and societies,
Okay.
probabilistically. So that would make me feel that Christian influence is could have well helped influence that story with it, you know. But it's so complicated. I mean, it's all very complicated. Myth, yeah, where we get, especially where you got the Assyrian and the Vanir. Why do you have these two groups of gods? Why do you have the Nile? And you don't quite see that elsewhere. And most people think, well, perhaps that's a come together of two different cultures reflected. Then why the Jotnar? Why are they monstrous beings? That remind people of the dead because they're meant to be sort of, sort of. I don't know. There's some mentions of them as maybe being having sort of blue skin. I think if I remember rightly, which is what you would associate with dead people, like hell and people like that. So yeah, it is interesting. I would, yeah, but we were talking about this before we came on in terms of history and prehistory. So prehistory is the lack of writing, lack of history. Um, and whilst we have some historical text, there is a lack of archaeology that can help us with prehistoric Old Norse myths. Occasionally we see we've got some rune stones, which sometimes play out some of the myths. But again, I don't remember seeing Jutnar in them. Or do we see no, we don't even see. I don't even remember seeing Valkyries in them. And occasionally we see sort of coinage and similar brackets with gods on them. But again, I don't remember seeing Jutnar Valkyries. So I don't know. I don't know how old Jutnar could be in terms of mythological things, whether they're as old as time or whether they're brought in. Is that the same with Valkyries? And, I don't know. You have, I don't know if any, aware of any similar occurrences of such things in your knowledge of I mean, how did it work in the Americas? Because you're more familiar with the Americas than me. Did How did Christian conversion happen? Did we see the mythology or the religion of the Aztecs and the Incas and similar adapt to Christianity?
Starting in South America, I mean, basically you have, if you don't have a group of people that somehow managed to escape and live in an isolated area that was out of reach of the Spanish, um, that's basically where you're gonna now see tribes, um, or villages popping up in the South Americas. But when we look at Mexico and um, other more built or established, uh, modern or more modernly established Spanish speaking, um, countries, Christian Spanish speaking countries in South America. This is where you're going to see um, the enforced uh, way of life from
Yeah.
Spanish, where uh, they were turned into slaves, most likely. Um, and I mean, ironically, the tribal languages, there's some transference from uh, their tribal language into their form of Spanish, their dialect of Spanish. So Mexico comes from where the Aztecs call themselves Mexica or Mexicai. Can't remember the word. Um, so that was a bit of a harsh enforcement. uh, in New England, um, the zealotry was, in some instances, we have that same type of mentality of militarized enforcement, and hostile takeover. And then we have some cases where certain priests were able to basically argue their way into converting people into Christian. Um,
What I mean, without a gun or a knife,
without without a gun, just wear them down, wear them down. Um,
or give them something like the Christians did, like offer them food if you listen to our stories of love and
well,
harmony.
funny enough, the tribes taught the new little Americans how to grow their own food.
Oh
Um,
wow.
so uh, I'm not too sure. I don't remember all the fine details and some of the tactics that were used. Um,
But violence seems to be, de rigueur for Christians in sort of medieval times and the Middle Ages. Yeah, and we see like Charlemagne had a similar approach to the Northwestern Europeans,
yeah.
which is that if you don't become Christian, you will die, and so many died. But just say about I don't. Yeah, it's a. I wish we had more evidence for some of these things. There is actually a really good book I've got on etchings from a Scandinavian museum. And these etchings are from something like the 13th century, 14th century. And they show sacrifice. And it's almost like ritualistic behavior, pagan behavior that's still surviving long
Yeah.
enough to be sort of drawn or etched. And yeah, that's quite fascinating that, yeah, how do these things carry on if they weren't syncretic? Yeah, because if you gave yourself to a religion, you would surely give yourself to that religion, and within a generation or two, all the old ways would be forgotten. But the fact is that many of the old ways persist. Is that part syncretic from the paganism um, becoming Christian, or is it Christianity, certainly in Europe, being syncretic with the pagans to adopt a lot of the pagan features of Christianity, such as, I don't know, things like weddings and holy water, and people talk about Christmas trees and things like this, although I don't think that is stolen from pagans. But all sorts of things seem, there's these elements that actually many Christian beliefs, certainly from the European side of things, so the Roman Catholic Church, may have a pagan origin.
Yeah, you see, well, I can start with Ireland, where they have a history. If what the written history combined with the archaeology states, this is a country where you're not really going to have the purest religion or the purest spiritual practices because it's one group that comes in and conquers another group and takes it over and is conquered by another group and so on and so forth. So I think it left a type of openness um, to convert, um, where it was a little bit more easier in the early Dark Ages for the missionaries to come in and convert Ireland to Christianity. And that's where you get all the unique art that comes with it.
Mm.
And Armenia, it's kind of that same way. I think the pre-Christian Armenians sort of learned their hardest lesson with the Roman Empire, um, that came in and I think like sacked their town, like everything that they had of their deities were destroyed or stolen by the Romans. And they seem to be very capable of change, um, where some groups of people, like the pre-Christian Anglo-Saxons, are willing to be put to the sword.
Mm.
Um, so I think there's a type of mentality that comes with it. Uh, and so in Armenia, although unfortunately there's been a lot of uh, loss of whatever pre-Christian religion and religions they had, um, due to a lack of writing system that didn't come in until later.
Yes. Yeah, well, you find it's the Christians that introduce writing to most cultures. So that's why all the pretty much all the history we have is Christian when it comes to outside the Roman Empire. Something, um, you know, it's true of the Germans and the Old Norse. So it makes sense, yeah. And that is one of the frustrating things that, you know, it was the Christians who managed to document the things. However, how accurately did they document them? And
Yeah,
that's just after they spent the previous few hundred years getting rid of all science, and that by using the paper and the manuscript and material to write their prayers on, and destroy years of science and
research, everything else.
research, everything. Yeah, so it's quite ironic, really.
Yeah. Because there's some groups out there, like the Iberians, the Iberian language still exists to this day.
Yeah, it seems
The,
very isolated in a way.
yeah, the Iberian had a big influence on Spanish culture and a bigger influence on Portugal. Um, and that was pretty interesting that they managed to do that. And they inquired too. There are some symbols that you see universally, like the like all the trident type symbols. Either if it's a just one long stick and there's three prongs coming from it, or something that's a little more trident-like, whether it's used for the same purposes or not, that still exists. And it's kind of interesting that the Iberians were never completely They didn't face any type of decimation or absolute domination culturally. Uh,
Hmm.
whereas Armenia, they would have. It looks as though they could have been a little more diligent. They could have been a little more sidestepping when it came to those changes and trying to hold on to what they had.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, we always hear that Romans are flexible. You
Yeah.
know, when it comes to other cultures and their beliefs, Romans were quite.
Yeah, because you see different regional gods emerge when they
Hmm.
really find stubborn groups of people, like in Bath, uh, in Britain, as an example, Sulis Minerva.
Yeah.
That god pops up, probably because the Britons at the time were extraordinarily difficult to deal with.
Hmm.
And so that was kind of the more happier compromise that kept things a little more peaceful.
Yeah, and we see that in history as well. I mean, I just did a piece about storm gods and how Zeus became the storm god in Greece as well as the sky father. So he took that, and you think, well, what happened to the storm god? And he said, it's like, yeah, was the population upset that it changed or not? And we actually find that if you know the story of Heracles, where he's the hero in Greek myth and does the 12 labors and the like. Um, he isn't the son of Zeus's wife, which upsets her quite a lot. But Zeus's wife is called Hera, and Heracles means glory to Hera. Why is Heracles called glory to Hera when Hera hates him? And you actually see that he must have at one point been Hera's son and moved because there was no room for a storm god because Zeus became the storm god. And but you see these names, you know, the clues in the name saying that there was a bit of understanding there and history there that made things more acceptable to people. And I like those things in history, where you have those gods merging in Bath, and we see that elsewhere. We see Zeus. Is it Zeus Amnon? As in Ammon Ra in Egypt. We see Zeus Amnon in I think it's in Cyprus in the Phoenicians with Ramses. You see these merging of things, and I love those clues we can find because it allows us to understand how people try to relate and accept and be flexible.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, it's interesting. Um, it also just kind of reminded me there was out west, there are a series of indigenous mounds made that some people say giants were buried in.
Okay,
And there's a particular story of a cave where the tribe was getting they had enough with this one giant or this group of giants, and they decided that they were going to go start a fire and smoke him to or have him suffocate to death through smoke.
so they're
A
going to
giant.
build a huge fire then.
Yeah, so they smoked him. They smoked him to death through a cave that he was living in.
Okay, yeah, I didn't realize how many giant stories there are in
Yeah,
the Americas, but there are lots, huge amounts. There's no bias set. I mean, giants are known across the world.
yeah. It's interesting that they do still come up. There's a part though in the story where I don't know if it's Western wish fulfillment in the translation of it, or it was a descriptive, uh, like in particularly the Irish and Welsh myths, where people use these very odd descriptives of things they don't really have any other vocabulary for. Like in the Tales of Muldoon, when he arrives to the island of fiery swine, he says, the myth says, creatures that looked like fiery swines or swines that were on fire. Um, but it says specifically that, or at least from the Westerners saying it, that these giants had red hair.
And we often associate that with sort of well, Germanic peoples, early, I guess hunter-gatherer. Well, no, there would have been Indo-Europeans by that time. So yeah, that's interesting. And so they think, yeah, and perhaps they were taller than the average Roman or whoever's documenting this. Yes, as I say, because it doesn't matter how actually tall a giant is, because giants can be different sizes, but they just have an aspect of them that seems more powerful or something. And that they would be like, oh, that's really interesting. I don't think I was aware of that.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's a bunch of small stories like that you can find popping up here and there within the tribes.
Yeah,
Um,
very interesting clue. Yeah.
yeah, but it also seems to be interesting too that whenever a giant comes up in history, something or any sort of myth, you now see it as a omen of ill. Seems to bear this really bad
Yeah.
something bad associated with it. To being a giant means something really bad.
Yes, yes. I don't. There aren't many good giant stories out there.
Yeah, there's no
So
right.
yeah, is it an insult? Well, it can't be an insult. Well, it depends because you see, like Ptah and then the creation myths, giants are fine, but as I say in folklore, giants are an insult or something to be worried about. Why are a bad thing that have happened?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I don't
So
know
there's
if it's a
giants.
symbolic
Yeah.
thing or
Oh, there are giant stories all over the world. It means that everybody's having a bad time, Garrett, because they got all these stories, all these bad things happening.
yeah.
Perhaps that's an indicator of yeah how happy we are as a human race. That all these yeah, giants going around doing bad things, all we need to be aware of. Hmm. Things to be scared of. Yeah.
I wonder if that relates at all to anything during humanity's hunter-gatherer days when animals would have been a lot bigger.
Um, I don't know if there'd be a direct relationship in terms of stories, but there'd be a psychological relationship. It's like the snake, for example, and the dragon.
Hmm.
Those kind of things. There certainly seems to be a psychological aspect there of that passing through. Um, so yeah, there'd be something like you're afraid of the dark, and you see figures in clouds or in mountainscapes or cliff faces. And there's probably things like that which and so they would be giant as we were looking at extra large. So maybe aspects of that in there, but I wouldn't have said from a gut feel that they're related because there are just too many stories. So I think that's more of a psychological thing rather than a very particular thing that's been passed through and adapted. But it
Yeah.
is interesting. I haven't really thought about giants being bad, but they are bad. Fee, fi, fo, fum, and all that. Yeah, it's
You smell the blood of Englishmen.
yeah, always English, isn't it? Always, yeah. Although I wonder if the French version of the story has changed that. It could be. I mean, there's an interesting nursery rhyme book. Oh, what have I done? I think I may have lent it to someone. It's nursery rhymes of 1914, the start of the First World War, and it alters things like Humpty Dumpty hated the Gauls, Humpty Dumpty. Yeah, well, it had some kind of rhyme about the French and the Germans and all that. Yeah, it's just quite interesting how these stories can sometimes adapt to what's going on in society at the time, and sometimes they stick, and sometimes they don't. Um, but yes,
It is particularly unique. Um,
yeah. If you're interested, I'll send you a couple of photos of the pages. If you may have a little chuckle at how the world was 100 years ago at the brink of war.
yeah, I'm glad to have a little review about it.
The
The
stories we were teaching children. Yes,
Yes, the stories being taught to children about hating all your neighbors.
Exactly. And yes, and it still persists. Well, not that it's done today, but the remnants of that is still there. I mean, there's a lot of, look at Brexit here, the remnants in Britain that I can't believe how many British people don't think they're European. It's quite mad. Yeah, it's
They do they yearn for the good old days when the crown never set on the or when the sun would never set on the British crown?
exactly. It's a romantic dream. Yeah, and it's like, we have to be practical here. Yeah, so but yeah, people like that, don't they? People want to have a sense of belonging and worth and the like, and that causes many of the issues we have. Yeah.
Do you think that could have also been if you're living in a more agricultural time, um, and you're kind of at the mercy of nature, and the world is such a bigger, scarier place filled with creatures you're not going to understand, is the idea that someone could defeat a giant or you could somehow call upon a god capable of defeating a giant would be a sense of drive, a sense of being able to overcome.
It gives you a sense of that, there is hope. Yes, I mean, the cattle raiding myth is a prime example of that. We see, where if another culture has cattle, um, then you can pray to your god to give you the strength to fight the enemy to get those cattle. Um, so yeah, that's a form of that. That your gods gave you the strength. The stories existed that the first warrior was able to do it, so why can't we? We follow this ritual and do what they did. We would be blessed by the gods. Uh, so yeah, absolutely, and that was a very powerful story, and that was a story that persisted across the Indo-European landscape and into the Near East and into Africa even. So yes, I absolutely think that people like those hero stories.
Okay, yeah. Because this entire time I've been thinking more a little bit about um, when I sent you that article on the video on the Ulm creature, the amphibious or the cave amphibian that's
Mhm.
nicknamed the baby dragon. It's mostly blind. It through hearing mostly will find its prey, and the only thing it won't really try to eat or attack. It doesn't normally go out and attack humans, I think, because it's only a foot and a half long.
Yeah, it's not particularly large at all.
But it it comes out and it eats some. It can eat something and live off that meal because of its metabolism for about 10 years.
Yeah, it's because it's cold-blooded and lives in the dark. It doesn't waste energy. Yeah,
Yeah, in the
don't think
sun.
it's quite as. I don't think it's overly terrifying. It would move very slowly and relies on the dark.
Yeah.
Um,
But being able to go into because I've been in speaking of Zeus, I've been in the cave in Crete that Zeus in the myth was born in.
okay,
And the steps alone scared the living shit out of me. Um, I don't want to know what it would be like going in there without those limestone steps because Crete in the middle of the summer going into a very cold cave means it's going to be a slip and slide from all that
yeah.
humidity. And to go inside of a cave like that is pretty scary because there's no light and it's dark and it's wet and you have no idea what's lurking in there, especially during that time period.
Well, yes, doubly so. Yeah, yeah. I mean, walking into a cave without the kind of lights we have is going to be scary. And even if I know, even if it's a public cave, yeah, we have access to during the day, which is all lit up, and we know it's all good. Come night time, if I was asked to walk into that cave, there's a natural fear that would creep him.
Yeah. And I guess there's just this idea of somebody walking in, let's say that little Ohm creature that might be adorable to look at in 2025. Um, what if it's now 10 feet tall or 10 feet long,
Yeah,
and it's the 10th year since it had its last meal and now it's hungry?
exactly. Yes. If you fall asleep in the cave and you wake up and it's chewing your foot off or something. Yeah, yeah. There are some scary creatures out there. I mean, from the Komodo dragons, the size of them, to bears, which we were so scared of we didn't even call them bears. We did call them bears, but not the real name for bears. So because we thought if we said their name, they'd turn up, with some of them. So we call them bear, so brown rather than name of the animal, the atlas.
Yeah.
Um, yes, yes, we have even today, there are certainly remnants of how human we are.
The Lion Man statue. I mean, if you think about how large lions were at that time period,
Yeah, exactly. Cave
um,
lions, definitely.
I wonder if that is remnants and storytelling of one individual being able to conquer a large animal, being able to slay a large animal.
It might be that. I mean, because you have the was it the Lyca in Greek, the wolfish rage. So there's a really good article by Bruce Lincoln about that, about how wolves can appear ferocious and rabid, yet they're not ferocious and, well, they're not rabid. They just know how to appear rabid. Underneath that, they're calm and can be tamed. And then, yes, there's a lot to be said on. That's why you have call it the manor band. There's a more recent word, but you have these groups of men that went out and trained to be men and pretended to be wolves and or lions, or when you see these talks these in Homer, Achilles raging, bringing his troops up, saying that you'll fight like lions, or the wolves of the old Norse. And in fact, they actually got, and I think the sort of comitatus, I guess you'd call it, of the old Norse, those boys were taken out for a year or two to train to be men to reach manhood. They were all given dogs, like wolves, to look after and to become one with the wolf, to understand that. But then at the end of the training, they had to kill their own pet dog,
Okay.
which is rather rubbish. Um, I love dogs, but but it was in effect another way of knowing that you can kill an animal like a wolf. Not only physically but also emotionally. I think that training was there. Is a sort of reflection of what you're saying.
Yeah, that's the one way to put it. Are you able to kill something you're so close to?
But also, it is also killing the animal that you may find in combat.
Mhm. Get ready to kill the animal, preparing to kill an animal. So I wonder if that must have been where giants originate from, or these kinds of stories, these rabid, giant, ferocious animals, these actions these warriors would have to take.
Or it may not, maybe indirectly. It's like the megaliths. You see these in the landscape, and you think, what built those? But if you're walking through woods and you hear a loud roar, or you see marks on the tree, or large holes dug, and you think, well, what did that? And perhaps it's because some of it's folklore. It's something you tell the children to keep them aware and keep them alive. If you see this, there's a giant around, go back home, sort of thing. You see many stories like that.
Huh. There's a lot of odd symbols um, that almost look like scratch marks associated with evil beings, particularly
Okay.
when you get out into the Middle East area. Um, I wonder if that could have been an influence, as people the wandering out into the woods and seeing a bizarre scratch mark.
Yeah, not being educated enough to understand where it's from, and then they disappear.
Yeah, they
The
must have
moral of the
thought,
story is if you see the scratch marks, run away.
yeah, that
Yeah.
that that scratch mark means the demon left its mark, or the
Mm,
evil spirit left its mark, or that ferocious, monstrous, horrid metaphysical thing.
yeah. Yeah, a good warning sign. Yes.
Or
That may all be the case. Yes.
or now you're wandering into giant land, a giant's land.
Yeah, yeah, or monsters land. As I say, giants and monsters I think are interchangeable. You know, certainly for things like Utah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Mm.
Is there
Um,
um is there a particular word that like in the Norse myths people would take and then translate into giant, or they just would call them
no, what's happened with Utah is that the early translators saw it a monstrous being and thought, "Oh, a monstrous being, it must be a giant." And then every other translator, because translators are lazy, sort of copy previous translators. And so the term Utnar, meaning giant, persisted until probably 20 years ago when someone actually said, well, hold on, we should actually translate this again properly. I said, oh no, Utnar doesn't mean giant, it means just a monstrous being.
mhm.
A ravenous, hungry, rabbiting, almost wolf-like in a way, but more human, a humanoid version.
Okay. So yeah. Huh. So like these words might be like the controller of the ravenous or the spirit of the ravenous animals.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't know the animals in it, but yeah, so a ravenous being. So whatever being is, a monstrous ravenous being. So it could easily, I mean, it's humanoid in the Old Norse myths because they talk about them breeding with other humans.
Mhm.
So you have that humanoid aspect, but it could easily be a just a figure, or an elf or a giant or a bear or a wolf, or, a large animal, lion, snake. Well, it doesn't. You do find though that in the evolution of stories, humans come after animals. So it's almost like this monstrous being a human. The story has reached peak evolution. But if you go back in time, that monstrous being may well have been an animal. So yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, you could be onto something.
Huh.
Hmm.
Because I was wondering if there's a literal word that got translated into giant. It's like here's this group of people, um,
The etymology, yeah, I don't.
like there's a cluster of
Interesting.
different kinds of people referred to as the Fae or the fairies in Irish
It's because
myth.
giants are fairies. Not
And
doesn't say that to his face, or their face, but
well, but it also covers a cluster of different beings too. Like now the fairies aren't just giants, it's also like the spirits of the dead, the people of the mounds. Um,
yeah. So I don't know the etymology of the word giant. Yeah, whether it is even giant is the word you'd need to look for the etymology of, because it may be another word that was then translated into English. So that's an interesting one. I'll try and find that out for our next chat, Garrett, the where actually the term giant came from.
okay.
That'll
Because
be my
now
homework.
it's like because I'm so curious, and maybe it's just because I've more recently developed an interest in learning other languages. Um, I'm curious if it specifically came from a certain written source. Um,
Hmm.
in the Middle East, we have the jinn. That's a group of people
Ah,
that are born from a fire. We have fairies who seem to
from
either come from the mounds or cross from this veil. Uh,
It's for gigantic, the Latin gigantus, gigantic, giant. That's where it's
gigantic,
from, meaning big.
big.
So,
So,
gigantic meaning, yeah, huge, I guess.
so
Uh,
in Latin, would gigantic implicate uh, these things that could be very fearful,
well,
or
it's anything giant. So a big version of something. It's a gigantic slug, scary slug, or gigantic frog, or gigantic penguin. I don't know. Gigantic anything. It should raise fear. And then we've just
gigantic.
simplified it to giant.
Okay, interesting. So that would have to, because now I wonder if that now is a or was at one point a multi-meaning word.
Well, it's a generic word. Yeah. Oh, but so I need to do. So the gigantochemy, uh, according to this, a mythic race of gigantes had the battle against the Olympian gods. That's like Titans in a way. So yeah, I don't know. There's probably more to it. I'll need to do some homework, Garrett. But that
Yeah,
on well next chat.
next chat. I will do yeah, I'll do some home I'll try my best to do as much homework as I can as well.
Yeah, we compare notes. Yeah,
Yeah, that would be
down.
really interesting. What would happen, to examine the state of a word's evolution if it meant one particular thing? Because um, I mean, you go back into early words. I mean, the idea of us having this Proto-Indo-European conversation, I proposed one day that language. Um, words might be simpler, but they might be more multi-meaning. Uh,
Yes, yes, but yes, absolutely, totally agree. I mean, yeah, words probably weren't simpler to be honest, but they certainly could be multi-meaning. I
yeah,
think
because you could take
because yeah,
one word, um, and it can mean six different things.
depends on the context and stuff. It's like saying snow or something. And if you're from an Inuit, the word snow is almost meaningless. What kind of snow you need to know more. Where for us, we just use one word, and that means 20 things in Inuit language. So absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So I guess we'll conclude it here for now.
Yes, yes. Conversations are always fascinating, Garrett. I
Very
don't know
much.
how we do it, but I like our little, very casual wanderings through these things.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack and explore.
Mm,
And I guess we're being semi-scientific, at least bouncing ideas off of each other
exactly.
in
But
the
yeah, I'd rather do some
process.
proper research rather than guessing because I don't want to be. Yeah, but yes, it sounds like there's something in the Greek myth that has our answer.
Yeah. Or maybe even earlier. We could go to
Maybe even earlier. I don't think it's Proto-Indo-European, but it doesn't feel like it. But we'll see. We'll see.
and then in the myths, like the Norse myths, and when we get into Havamal and talking about the runes, it says it's useful to man, but not to either giants or the Jotun.
Mm,
Um, and it says reference to it's like from the advice of the elder gods,
hmm
meaning there's some type of acknowledgement of predecessors, some
Exactly.
predecessor religion or
Predator, like Tyr was the old Sky Father, without a doubt, of the Germanic tribes, but he was moved. Thor became the Sky Father. Um, Almost an opposite thing to happening to Greece. But then Odin came along as a chief god, so the Sky Father isn't even that important, relatively. So yeah, there's a whole new mythology that came through with Odin and Thor,
yeah,
and then Tyr was re-mythologized. So
yeah.
it could be relating to that.
But I find that yeah, but it's so interesting that he goes to an elder god. It's like, what is this? Me calling you for some
Hmm.
study material?
Yeah, well, yes, yes. It is, and I love those sort of things. And you see that in other myths too. Even the Bible talks of God being part of other gods. You know, when they're splitting up the lands, dividing lands out, they divide them to gods, and Yahweh gets Israel.
Yeah,
So,
there's
so
different.
what happened to all the other gods?
And then he
That's,
exiled the Israelites out of it.
oh yeah, that's how. Yeah, that's the whole story. Yeah, a different chat.
A
Anyway,
different chat for a different time. But
indeed, I have to go. Yes,
yeah,
but it's been, I say, always fascinating. Yeah, I do like our catch ups. It's a a very chilled afternoon for me. Thank you.
all right. It's been a good start to my afternoon. Thank you.